y'all can start your locals as you see fit. This is episode 234. And we are on the tubes, the YouTubes, I believe. Let's double check and make sure. Hello out there, friends. I'm a bit behind the ball today because I was trying to publish an episode of Go Time before this started, and I was like a smidge away from hitting the publish button. Didn't quite get there, so we'll just publish it after, but that's why I'm slightly distracted. And Feross, you had some sort of a meeting heading up to this, or you just, or what? What was it?
I was on the Shop Talk podcast with.
Oh, you're on Shop Talk.
Yeah, so I just like directly, like I literally went straight from that to this.
Nice. How'd it go?
Good. Yeah. Just
talking socket.
Talking security. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love those guys. We're having them on. Gosh, next Thursday they're coming back on to play Front End Feud again. They
cool.
played against Syntax last time and they won. So we invited Chris and Dave back, and now they're going to go up against Una and Adam from the CSS podcast.
Nice.
Next Thursday, if you're available, they're looking for. We need one JS Party teammate for each team, and I haven't locked them in yet. So I don't know what you're doing next Thursday, but if you are free, you have an open invite to play some Front End Feud with us.
Next Thursday. Doesn't work. Yeah. Thursday after would work, but not next Thursday.
Fair enough. We'll have to pass on Feross then, because scheduling these four people was an exercise in email and DMs. Just between the five of us, it was very hard to find a Thursday that worked. So we're gonna keep it as is.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I was talking to some like big customer for Socket, and they were like, I'll have my assistant talk to your assistant to schedule time, and they were like, what's your assistant's email address? And I was like, oh crap, am I supposed to have an assistant, or are they gonna think I'm too small of a company? So then I was like, I went and made an email alias, assistant at Socket.
Assistant at just an alias.
And I was like, yeah, okay, here's my assistant's email. Here you go. And then they totally bought it. So
nice.
You might want to get an assistant for
assistant at. That reminds me of a story that Connor Sears told Adam on Founders Talk. He's co-founder of Rewatch, which started as like a GitHub internal, GitHub TV, and then they started a startup around it. But they're like enterprise sales immediately, which is probably kind of what you're doing to a certain extent, and like big customers, you know. And it was him and his co-founder, and at one point they had like sold the customer on the service, and they're like going through the acquisition process of like actually getting everything set up, and there's like service level agreements, etc. And the customer's rep was like something along the lines of, one of the things we're going to need you to provide is your org chart, and so we know like who to contact for what stuff. And he's got like a 2-person org chart. It's him and his co-founder. He's like, could we just just send him a picture of like 2 people's faces, or what do we do here? Act bigger than we are.
Mm-hmm.
You reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are live. Got Luca here. Everybody's recording locally.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to put a message out to our channel. Luca, we do have a JS Party channel in our changelog Slack. Some people listen live and chat in there, but I will monitor and integrate, so you don't have to worry about it. And I can never spell your last name on the fly. Casonato. Casonato. Okay, that's out there. Good to go. Make sure that our soundboard is working. Can you hear this?
Web lovers.
Oh.
Web lovers.
There's the whole thing.
Your mind is a powerful weapon, Jerod.
Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. The soundboard is live. I'll never let Amel live this one down.
Your mind is a powerful weapon, Jerod.
She accidentally complimented me one time. And I don't get compliments very often. So, I mean, when someone says something nice about me, I got to turn it into a soundboard clip and just play it back. The best one of recent, though, is Chris.
That's a great idea. I'm glad I had it.
He said that one recently. That was great. Okay, so just a real quick rundown, Luca. So the show's roughly 45 minutes. There's going to be like 15 minutes break, 15 minutes break, and then the last 15 minutes. The breaks, you're still live on YouTube. You're just not on the official podcast, so it is a good chance to relax, chit-chat.
Okay.
Go to the bathroom if you have to. You're still on the live stream, but you're not on you're in between.
Yeah.
We don't do the ad reads with you here. We do keep the show family friendly, so we can keep the explicit tag off the feed just to reach more folks. So you will get bleeped or ducked in the final edit if you do cuss. You won't offend us here. But
I won't try. I'll try not to.
try not to. If it slips, it's not a big deal.
No hot takes today.
Yeah, I mean, you can hot take it. Just keep it friendly hot takes. And if you do, it's no big deal. We'll just edit it. So
Okay.
We just like to tell people that so they're not offended by our edits. What else? We do edit for listenability. So if you screw up and want to start a sentence over, totally cool. Just like make it obvious and just stop and say, let me try again. Take a breath so it's an easy edit and then start back in from the top.
Sure.
That being said, it's a conversational show. So, as the three of us sitting down to coffee or to beers or to water, whatever it is you like to intake via liquid, imagine that's what we're up to. And that's kind of how we like the show to sound at the end of the day. Sound good?
Yep.
If you feel self-conscious that you're talking a lot, don't. You are the guest. You will talk a lot. That's kind of how it's going to work. Ready to start?
Yep.
Okay, Luca Casonato. Just want to get that right. Where is our intro music? Here it is. Hello, friends. It is JS Party time. I'm Jerod, your internet friend, and I'm joined today by my friend Feross. What's up, man?
Hey, Jerod, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Have you played with Deno at all?
Just a small bit.
Have you built websites at all?
Yes. Many.
Okay, so I've got a treat for you today. And Feross, I know you built websites. In fact, I was on one of your websites today because I was getting ready to put out last week's JS Party, in which we referenced your annoying site, the most annoying site. And I accidentally opened, I thought I'll put it in the show notes because we talked about it on the show. I accidentally opened the site up in my browser, and I immediately cursed you and and the ground you walk on for that. Because, man, holy cow, still effective, that site. Still effective. I could barely get the thing to stop opening new windows. It even has, like, I tried to do the Apple Pay thing now. I don't know if you've been working on it. I tried to open Apple Pay, and then, like, anyways. You should take that site down at some point. But anyways, I know you make websites.
Twitter's blocked the URL now.
Oh, really? So if you link to it, they just won't redirect?
Yeah, they won't let you tweet it.
Beautiful. That's some
It's been censored.
Yeah. Wow, they're really censoring a lot of the people these days. Well, I don't want to censor any longer our guest, who hasn't been able to talk yet, because we haven't introduced him. It's Luca Cassinato from the Deno team. Welcome, Luca.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Fresh off your launch, and I can't avoid a pun, because you've launched a fresh,
Heard that one
new.
before.
Yeah, you're gonna hear it a lot more.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, you picked the name, not me. I do like it.
Yeah, it's a good.
I like the lemon based icon as well. Cool stuff. A new web framework for Deno from Deno. It's like an official Deno project, right? Like y'all are building it and supporting
Yep.
it into the future.
Yep. That's the idea.
Awesome. What was the idea? Why? Like what was the impetus or the reason why you decided to build this?
Yeah. So originally the idea was, the original idea was actually not to build a framework. The idea was to just like have like a tech demo to showcase like a bunch of cool features in Deno, and like how you can use them together to like make websites essentially. And over time, this turned into, oh wait, this is actually really nice to use. Like we started building utilities all over the place, which were like nice to use, and it turned out that we could integrate this all together into some sort of like cohesive bundle. And yeah, we started using that for some internal projects. The team internally really liked it, so we decided to, yeah, like put more effort into it and open source it.
Mm-hmm. I like how the JS community, and I guess the TS community as well, what do we call ourselves nowadays? The web devs are starting to embrace just even the term framework. Like we're starting to see frameworks come out. And a long time it was like libraries and routers and packages. And it was very much a build your own thing out of these smaller things. But I think at this point, frameworks they're back again, or they're here for the first time perhaps. I think we're starting to be like, you know what? It's nice to have a lot of things all in one place, maintained by a group. And I wonder, was that something you all thought about, like even the word framework for this thing?
It's been like the core, one of the core ideas of Deno for a long time, right? To have this whole battery is included runtime, where we're not just a runtime, but we also provide things like formatting and linting and testing and dependency management and like documentation generation and like a million other things, all in the same binary, maintained by the same people with the same opinions, to sort of give you like a cohesive experience. And I think this actually, it's pretty, it's very nice that we managed to also extend this to this like web framework now, because those same ideas that we build Deno with, we also use to build this framework, right? So like it really nicely integrates with Deno, and it has the same like core principles that things should be fast and things should be easy to use and things should not be bloated. Yeah.
Ross, what about your thoughts on frameworks versus libraries? I know you've been very much a bring things together, like make your own decisions. I do like that ethos of like, I'm going to pick, like a craftsman would pick their tools, you know? And I know that you built a lot of websites over the years, and it seems like each time we talk about the tech inside your websites, and it's always a little bit different, like you pick different things. Mm-hmm. Curious what your thoughts are on like the framework movement that's happening currently.
I'm a huge fan of it, actually. I'm starting to lean more toward that direction. Just, it's nice to not have to think about, these details when you're trying to solve a problem, and to keep your mind at the level of the problem you're solving and not constantly going down into the lower level of trying to tweak the way the routing works or that, these kinds of implementation details when you're trying to just solve a problem. So, no, I'm a huge fan of it now, and it helps you focus on what you're trying to do, just the actual problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here for it as well. Go ahead.
I feel like very often with a lot of people, it's like they think they don't like it until they start using it. Like they think they don't want the opinionation until they use something which has the opinionation, and then they don't want to go back.
Right.
Because it just, once you've used it, you realize like how much time this saves you, by not having to make all these decisions, but have someone else make the decisions for you.
Yeah, so I'm from the old days of the web where like pre-Rails, pre-Ruby on Rails, there wasn't much. And then that really brought like the framework into the forefront. And then there was like a backlash against that in the Ruby world with Sinatra, which is more akin to like Express in terms of what it provides. And you could use Ruby on Rails, which was a batteries included framework in the Ruby world, right, to build your web apps. Or you could go the Sinatra route, which was like this super clean, minimal, but beautiful, basically router plus some other things. And if you use that, you would then pull in different things that you need. And I got attracted to that style, and I went that way. A couple websites. And what I found myself was like piecemealing together Sinatra plus all these other components to basically be my own ad hoc Ruby on Rails. And then, but it was just mine. I'm the only one that, it wasn't along with
Yeah.
the big group of people working on it. Like I had all these 17 different plugins in order to recreate that. I think something about that gravity of a bunch of people all putting their work on this one thing, especially when it's supported by, right, like the runtime creators and maintainers, is pretty attractive. Even though at first it kind of offends your sensibilities of like, hey, I'd rather pick each part. Eventually, you start to see like why that's attractive, and so it's pretty cool that I think we're starting to see a lot of people step up and say, let's go batteries included and see how that turns out.
Yeah.
So Fresh has its own view of the world. Every framework does. Otherwise, why create a new one, right? Just contribute to one that currently exists. Tell us the perspective of the Deno team and the Fresh team on what a web framework in 2022 should look like.
Sure. So yeah, Fresh is really built to be fast. Like not like fast as in it serves fast websites. And you as a user using a website should have a great user experience and a reliable user experience, even if you're in a slow network or in a slow device. It should not drain your battery. It should try to use the platform for as many things as possible. Like it shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel. So Fresh really tries to not reinvent the wheel, like pretty much anywhere. It tries to really stick close to things that have already proven popular in other frameworks, and that have just like shown to be very fast or very reliable for users over the last couple of years. One of them being server-side rendering by default, and not shipping megabytes of or even hundreds of kilobytes of JavaScript to users on every request, but rather shipping them rendered HTML and then like hydrating parts of that HTML as is necessary. Yeah, so that's kind of the worldview. Try to make it like fast and small and use things which people are already familiar with and have proven to work well.
So no build step, no configuration unless you want to. A lot of the niceties, the zero JavaScript overhead into the client by default, but of course, kind of allowing you to opt into more and more of that as need be. So it's a multi-page server-side rendered application? Like as you navigate different pages in your browser, are you loading fresh pages every time?
Yeah, exactly. So like there's no client-side routing at all. It's all completely server-side routed. And there's obviously downsides to this, right? Like there's upsides and downsides to the trade-off that you have to make. Like if you want to have a very great offline experience, that's not something you can do. Like you need to do more on the client. But most pages are things like blogs or marketing sites or like even applications where like e-commerce sites, which are, well, they're applications, right? Like there's a lot of interaction that goes on there, but you don't want them to, imagine to buy something, you'd have to like open your web browser or your app store, sorry, search for the store that you're trying to buy something from, download their app, and then start using that. Like that's sort of how we're building a lot of sites right now. Except you don't go to the app store, but instead you type in a URL and then you have to wait like 6 or 7 seconds on your 3G connection or 20 seconds for all the JavaScript to download before you like see anything that's interactive. Yeah, that's really not a great development. Like we want to push back on that and try to do as much server-side as possible and really only ship things to the browser that's absolutely necessary to be in the browser. Like things that require sub 100 millisecond response times, like I don't know, like changing the color of a input field as you type, like input validation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I wish there were some heuristics around that decision of client-side routing versus server-side routing, because it really seems like there are cases where each one has its strengths, and I think my view of the world is that server-side rendering and routing, I guess, as a consequence of that, is probably like the 80/20. I think it's on the 80 side of websites and web apps, whereas client side is probably more on the 20. And if it was me, it's probably like 90/10, but that's just my view of the world. But I think it's hard to make that call. Like for us, have you ever had to decide, like, do I do client side, like SPA? Do I do client side routing? Do I do server side? And what are the the tipping points that would push you in one direction or the other in terms of like what you're trying to build?
I mean, I think that with SPAs or client-side routing, single-page apps, that model, you have the flexibility that if you do decide you need some of those features, like you do want to have, I don't know, let's say audio playing across page loads, so like you can have music, some audio player playing even when you click a link, or something like that. That stuff's just not even possible in the kind of fully multi-page app model. And so I think some people probably are picking these client-side single-page app models for their website just because of the flexibility of like not knowing whether they're going to need that in the future, and not wanting to be trapped, I guess. I felt that myself when I was building BitMidi. I needed that behavior, and so I was forced into this sort of model. But then other times I wanted to just use like React or Preact and have this nice sort of modern development flow, but also be able to do server-side rendering and have no client JavaScript. And I felt like it was pretty hard to get, like I was either going to have to go and build a really old school website, or have to take on client-side routing and client-side everything. And so it's cool that Fresh is, I really like that it's like you get to write your app in a modern way and get the sort of like one-way data flow that React and Preact and all that stuff gives you, while still getting all the advantages of a multi-page app. So I think this is actually going to be a really nice sweet spot for folks.
Yeah, like I always like to like Figma and like your blog page, right? Like Figma is very obviously is something that you need to do client-side rendering for. Like this is something that's impossible to do with server-side. There's just too much interaction. But something like your blog, this probably does not require server-side rendering at all. And it's like, it doesn't require client-side rendering at all. It can be fully server-side rendered. And like, it's really difficult to figure out like at what point, like, is an e-commerce site on what, like, is that something you need to SPA, MPA? I think it really depends, like, as Feross said, like, on exactly what you want to be doing. Like, if there are things that you require an SPA for, then you sort of have to use an SPA, right? But like, I think you should try to default to an MPA and then only go with the SPA route if you really have to. Like if there's no other way around it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Go ahead, Feross.
So what's the flow like then for upgrading to an SPA or going into an SPA once you've started building something in Fresh? I see on your site you have this thing called like an island. Maybe could you explain a little bit about islands? Because I've never heard.
Yeah.
It's funny. It seems like every so often there's these new words that the JavaScript community kind of invents for new concepts. Like tree shaking was one a while ago that it felt like we already had a word for it in previous. Like in C compilers, they call that a linker, the linking step. But we had to create a new word. So is island something like that? Could you explain what an island is for us?
Yeah. Islands is like progressive hydration, essentially. It's not quite progressive hydration. It kind of depends on how you define progressive hydration. The idea of islands is that you do server-side rendering and you enhance, with client interaction, only some components of the page on the client. So for example, you have a blog page with a comment section. You want the comment section to be like highly interactive and client-side rendered, but you want the markdown itself of the blog to be completely server-side rendered. The idea is that comment section can be an island, which is like client-side rendered. The JavaScript for that is shipped to the client, but the surrounding scaffold does not need to be shipped to the client at all. Like only the markup itself, the HTML needs to be shipped to the client. And this like naming was who came up with it? I'm like so terrible with names today. It's absolutely horrendous. Jason Miller, right? Jason Miller came up with this concept of island architectures like 2 years ago, I think. He wrote a blog post about it. There's a really great illustration on his blog actually about like that really like showcases very well what it looks like, where you have this page and you like very specifically hydrate certain components, but not the entire page.
Okay, so an island would be a specific component that you want to hydrate client side. Let's take the
Yeah.
comments example, because I think I get it, but I might not get it.
Mhm.
Is your whole comments section the island, or is each individual comment an island?
So yeah, that really depends on what you, yeah, it depends. Like as everything in software engineering, it always depends,
Sure,
right?
Typically.
So yeah, so let's say you want to update the comments, like you want to live refresh them in the browser as they're being posted, you would make the entire comment section an island because then you can like add or remove comments from the list. If instead you want to, let's say each comment has a share button, which opens like a share dialog, and that needs some
Sure.
client-side JavaScript. Then, and it doesn't, and it only like the comment content itself can be server-side rendered. Then you could make one island per comment. It's really like the lowest, like the smallest amount. Let's see, like the smallest component surrounding the interaction, I guess.
Okay.
That's maybe.
So let's imagine a circumstance, the former circumstance. So we have a comments section that we want to be highly interactive. Each comment just like floats in from the side or whatever we want to do. Okay. So I make my comments component an island, and that means it's client side hydrated. But what about the existing comments that are previously there? So on a typical MPA, server side rendered, you know, if I have 7 comments on my blog post and I hit Command R to refresh, my server is going to render the HTML for those 7 comments. Now, does that still happen, but now you hydrate the interactivity, or are you actually just dynamically loading the HTML or JSON, whatever it is, that gets hydrated?
You can do either. So by default, what will happen is that it will render the HTML on both the client and the server. So the fresh homepage has like this counter example on like right in the homepage. That counter is server-side rendered, but the server-side render has the buttons disabled, for example. So when the client hydrates, it enables the buttons. So you still have the shell there. You don't get like a layout jump, but it's not interactive yet, and it shows that it isn't interactive until the JavaScript is there on the client to like deal with it.
I see.
But like if you want to render some scaffold on the server, that's like in your component, you can conditionally check like if I'm on the server, return a scaffold, right?
Yeah. Or if you want it crawled. So like maybe I want my comment section
Sure,
crawled,
yeah.
and so I'm going to server-side render it. That being said, every time you add a comment, you break my cache, and now I'm dynamically rendering this page more often than I would otherwise, and so there's performance concerns. So it's kind of an it depends all the way down. And it sounds like with the islands architecture, you have the flexibility to make those decisions on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, like a lot of frameworks like Next.js and Remix, they'll send the entire renderer for the entire page to the client, right? To be able to do client-side navigation and routing. And because Fresh does not do any of this, like you can be very, very specific about what you send to the client. Like you can really scale it down to as small as you need it to be.
And what are the wins for doing that?
So the wins are that you ship a lot less JavaScript to the client, right? Like if you have a blog and you use Next.js and you have use React Markdown or whatever to render some Markdown into HTML, you do that once on the server, then you ship the entire rendering infrastructure to the client, you ship the Markdown to the client, and then you do the rendering again on the client, even though it's already been done on the server. Like, what's the point there, right? Like that's just wasting CPU cycles on your mobile device. So, right, like there's the content hasn't changed since the server rendered it versus when the client renders it. So you can avoid that entire thing.
So this islands concept is not like a fringe part of Fresh. This is like core to what Fresh is, right? Because I generated a scaffolded app, and there's routes and there's island. Like these are folder names in the structures, islands and routes. And so you're gonna be writing some islands, I suppose,
Yeah.
when you're using fresh.
Yeah.
Although,
Although,
Frost, is this an old concept that's been renamed, or is this a new concept for you? Because now he's explained what it means. I mean, for me, it makes sense, but I'm not sure if it had like a previous name or if it's actually just been invented by Jason Miller and the JS peoples.
It's not ringing any bells for me. I mean, I know there's other frameworks that let you decide whether certain components should run on the client or on the server. I think Meteor even had like something.
Yeah.
This is like a long time ago. I don't know what they called it, but no, I think like my question about islands is just like how easy is it to go between something being an island and something not being an island? Like, because you have a whole folder there for it. So like if I start making some islands and then I realize actually I don't want this to be an island, is it a whole bunch of work to go back and forth? Because I would worry about.
Nope.
I'd almost want it to be just like a Boolean or something that I could turn on and say, do this on the client or do this on the server.
Yeah, and it really is like the Boolean is it in this folder or is it in your components folder or is it in your islands folder? That's it. Like that's the only difference. The files are exactly the same. It's just a regular preact component.
The code is just a regular preact component.
Yep.
Okay.
And like the server-side render will automatically figure out when you're importing, or actually not when you're importing, but when you're using an island, and it'll only ship the code to the client if you're actually using a given island. So you can have like hundreds of islands, and it'll only send the code for the islands that you're actually using to the client.
Okay. So the framework is just smart enough to know it's in this folder. These are islands, and if it's not an island. Like that's your indicator.
Yeah.
So drag and drop for us. Just drag it out of that islands folder, drop it into the components, I guess.
Yeah.
Not the best diffs, but
well,
like a
Boolean,
like a Boolean prop or something would be a better diff in terms of like I'm switching it, but trade-offs.
I also wonder if you're going to want to have more flexibility down the line in terms of like how do you deal with an island, because like you might want to have the like certain ones where there's not even a server side render at all and it's like 100% client side, because maybe or maybe you want some where it blocks the page, like you want to this like island is super important, so you want to like I don't know, send it like pretty urgently down, or I can imagine somewhere you would say like don't even like load the code for this until they scroll it into view, because this is like a really low priority island, so just save on that JS if they don't even scroll to the comments section, don't even send it. So I don't know, you might need, I wonder if you're going to need to add more options and more flags there, and then the islands folder won't be enough because you need like islands and then like 3 other kinds of types of islands.
yeah, I get it. So I think so let's see. Right now what Fresh does is it will hydrate the islands as quickly as it can, but it'll like still try to yield to the browser as often as it can, so you don't like block animation, stuff like that. But it is actually totally possible that we add an option in the future where you could just like export an options bag from your islands folder, or from your islands file in your islands folder. Because so the other restriction is that you have to have 1 island per file in the islands folder. So every file is specifically 1 island. So you can like have an options bag there which says this island created once it scrolls into view, or once, I don't know, it should only be loaded on small devices, or it should only be loaded with this media query matches, or whatever else, right? It's just not implemented.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah, that's cool.
So the islands folder, then the routes folder. Tell us about routing, how it works.
Yeah, so the routes folder is actually very much inspired by Next.js. This is one of these things which it just, like Next.js did an awesome job originally with how the routing worked. Still does, I think. And yeah, it's pretty much, it works the same way. Like it's 1 file per route. You can have dynamic routes. You can have have dynamic routes where you like specify the matcher yourself if you need to do something really advanced. But yeah, it's 1 file per route, and the route can have a component that it renders, and it can have a handler. And that handler can do things like data loading. Handlers are really just like async functions which take in a request and return a response, web request and web response. And so you can like do anything you want in there, And at any point in time, you can call the render function. This might not make much sense if you haven't seen the code, but it's right in the documentation if you want to look at it. And you can call that render function that will render out the component into a response. And by default, you don't need to specify this. Like the default for the handler is that it just renders out your component. But like if you want to do data loading, you can do that in there. Or if you want to do like a redirect, you can also do that in there. You can do like anything you want in there. It's just an HTTP handler, right? And like you can have different HTTP handlers for post methods and get methods, so you can like handle form submissions that way as well. So like routers, or the routes folder is really, you have one file per path, like path matcher you want to match, and inside of there you can declare both a component to render for that page and the handlers for each of the HTTP methods that you want to handle.
This is really cool. I like it a lot. It's really elegant. So you just have like, yeah. And it's cool. You have like a handler function that gets called, and you can do your data fetching in there, and then you can have the JSX component that gets passed in all the props and those can come from, those basically come from anything that's matched in the URL. So like props from the URL, like different very sort of substitutions in the URL, and then also anything that the get handler decides to return. So that's where you can do your like fetching stuff from the database or whatever you need to do. That's really cool. That's really, really cool. So I guess does that mean that this get handler thing runs for every single request? It's just like a constant. It sort of runs on every.
Yeah.
Okay. So then.
But
if you
like. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what you can do, and this is not implemented right now. Well, it is if you like put in some muscle work yourself. But you can cache these things as well. You can have something called middlewares, which allow you to essentially intercept routes before they're matched. Or intercept like large swaths of routes all at once. And then you can do things like caching, for example, if you don't want to re-render on every request.
So how would that work if you wanted to like have a page that you build it only once a day or something like that? You only.
Yeah, so that's, well, so the idea with Fresh is still that you would have, like you always have a server running. Like it's really built to deploy to the edge, to deploy to things like Deno deploying Cloudflare workers, where you can render really close, like server-side render close to your users, and where the cost of doing that is very low. So if you want to do something like that, what you would probably do is you'd put a CDN in front of the, like the origin, and use like cache response headers to tell the CDN to cache pages for a given amount of time.
Which is what we do with changelog.com, and it works great. I mean, I think it's actually a really great strategy. It's just server-side render it, but then just cache it for as long as you want at your CDN. Now that assumes that you have a CDN, of course. But what about the data then? So if I have my Denos running on all these different Cloudflare workers or Deno deploy edges, and I'm server-side rendering a response, but let's say I've got a Postgres database that lives in LaGuardia or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do they all just connect back to that, or is there a way of making that sucker live close to the edges? It's kind of a loaded question because I know this is something that lots of people are working on, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, so it really depends, as always, it depends on the yeah, no, I'm just prefixing this because I'm gonna like have answer a bunch of different ways here. So one way of doing this is if you're really read heavy, you can do global distributed replicas, right?
Right.
For your data. If your data doesn't change very often, you can do caches. If your data does change very often, you can have use something like Cockroachdb, which can run in a bunch of regions across the world, and it can have data live like even inside of the same like SQL table. You could have certain rows live in certain regions and certain other rows live in certain other regions. So for example, for users that are in the EU, you'd have their data live in Frankfurt, and if for users in the US, you'd have it live in, I don't know, somewhere in the US, in like Ohio or whatever. Yeah, and for users in Asia, you could have it live in, I don't know, Singapore or Japan or something like that. This really depends exactly on what you're doing. Like for a blog, it probably doesn't matter too much, right? Like
Sure.
even if you have a comment section on a blog, you could do caching there, where like if a comment doesn't show up, if a comment like shows up after 30 seconds versus after, I don't know, no seconds, like that doesn't really matter too much, right?
Can you render an island by itself? And the reason why I ask that is I'm starting to think about this situation where you have this server-side rendered or cached, in the case of what you're saying with put an origin, put a CDN in front of your origin and cache the response. That works great, except for like lots of websites have just like some sections that are dynamic. Meaning, let me change that. Not just dynamic, but personalized to the the signed-in user, for example.
Yeah.
And so that breaks a lot of caching in many places. And you're like, well, I have to render the whole page dynamically because it's different for Luca than it is for Feross. And I can have one that's for everybody who's logged out, but once you're logged in, it breaks. But I think maybe with islands, if you had like certain areas of your site that are personalized, you could potentially have a static version of the HTML, server-side rendered, quote unquote, but it's the same every time or whatever, cached, and then maybe hydrate just the dynamic personalized portions. If you could have an island by itself just be rendered. Is that something people are doing?
Yeah, so that's possible. The one problem with that is that it sort of this sort of is like you would essentially send back a empty shell to users if they're signed in, right? And you would then fill in that shell using client-side rendering. We much prefer the model where for stuff like this, you just render the page on every like request dynamically. Like we have these edges nowadays, like Deno deploy is like 34 regions across the world. You can get like 50 millisecond response time from like anywhere.
Yeah, but not if I'm going back to LaGuardia
not
for
if you're
my
in like
data.
Australia.
Like if you think about like an app like Facebook, which I honestly don't know how it works because I haven't used Facebook since like 2008. But I know it has like Messenger. I know it's got your list of friends. It's got your news. And like all these things are highly personalized to you, who you are. Like all that data needs to get fetched from some database somewhere. And so you're going back to that. So like the edge, at that point, your edge executions, they're kind of moot, aren't they?
Yeah, so exactly, you need to have your data distributed as well, right? Like if you only have your compute distributed, but not your data, then like that's not great. So yeah, you need to have your data distributed. And things like Cockroachdb, which is Postgres compatible, by the way, does allow you to do this. It allows you to spread data across the world to where your users are, so that you can have really fast read and write access to your data, right? And like if you don't care about write access so much, you can have global replicas, and global replicas will allow you to do really fast reads from anywhere at the cost of slightly slower writes, because you need to talk to some central database for the writes. So yeah, this really goes hand in hand with having some robust story on global distributed data. And I think that is actually something that currently we're really lacking. Like we don't really have a lot of good options for that. And like, I don't want to leak too much stuff, but this is something we are working on for Deno deploy. And like to have really awesome globally distributed data where you don't have to think of these trade-offs as much. It'll just like figure it out for you. So you can have like fast read access anywhere to your data.
I think that's the goose that lays the golden egg right there. And I think it's interesting to hear that you're working on it. I know Fly.io, for instance, is working on it. I'm pretty sure Cloudflare is working on it. I bet Netlify is working on it, etc. So exciting. I think it's been, and like you said, there are people like Fauna, Cockroach, who are providing like the data layer for those things. But somebody that pulls it all together into a singular service, I think is a pretty compelling offer at that point. I think until then, like all this other stuff is cool, but you're kind of like got that one missing piece. You want to tell us more? I mean, you don't want to say too much, but you could say more. I don't want to get you in trouble. He's just smiling at me now. No comment. Oh, let's take a break right here. We'll tease them. We'll have a cliffhanger. All right, we're on break. But you're still on YouTube, so don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble.
Oh no.
Feross already got himself in trouble.
Leak out our entire business plan and our strategies and everything during.
Well, it depends on how close it is. Sometimes you do want a nice calculated leak,
Yeah.
to let everybody know, like, ooh, Deno's they're about to win this race.
We had some pretty awesome announcements over the last few weeks. We need to sort of slow down here. We're growing too quickly. It's problematic.
Well, when you grow fast, there are definitely growing pains. That's for sure.
So, Jerod, was that the first break?
Nah, that would be the second break because I went too long, and we'll work one in.
Okay.
So we're 2/3 of the way through, yeah.
Okay.
So that is the first break, but it's actually going to be the second break in the final show. So we just have probably 10 to 15 minutes left. What haven't we covered at all here so far?
I feel like for us, you wanted to say something early, and then I cut you off with this CDN caching thing.
No, it's fine.
I took over from there.
Okay.
No, it's all good. I was gonna say maybe we should talk about is anyone using Fresh in production yet? Like who should not use Fresh today? Maybe what? How ready do you think it is? Like, should people?
What it's missing?
What it's missing. Should I port all my websites immediately to Fresh and?
Right.
Obviously,
yes.
This is the web. We do greenfield projects every day, all day.
Yes.
Yeah. No, every time a new framework comes out, I immediately port all my sites. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. You need something to do, right?
It's like once a week.
At least.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Getting started, what's missing, who should use it. All right. Feross, you want to kick us in, or you want me to do it?
Sure, yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Cool. So, do I say we're back now or something?
No, just ask my question.
Yeah. Okay.
You're good.
So Luca, who should use Fresh and who shouldn't? Maybe that's the more important question. Who is Fresh not for today?
Yeah, so if you're Figma, then don't use Fresh because you've already built an awesome product and you should not be using Fresh. If you're an established large company and you have a established, great, very performant website, then what's the point of switching, right? You already put in all the effort. If you personally thought, I was going to start a podcast, or no, yes, for example, I was going to start a podcast. I still need a website for my podcast. And obviously the difficult part with doing a podcast is not the podcast itself, but it's writing the website for the podcast, right? Obviously. So that's something you could totally do. Do your blog, marketing pages, e-commerce sites, anything greenfield like that. That's, I think, something great you can use Fresh for right now. If you have something which is really highly interactive and you requires client-side rendering, then Fresh isn't what you're looking for. Then you want something which is better suited to doing a lot of client-side rendering, like Remix, for example. But most pages in that 90 to or 80-20 rule thing that we were talking about earlier, that are mostly static and have little islands of interactivity, you can use Fresh for.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that Fresh is production ready?
Yeah. A lot of our Deno land properties run on it, like Deno.land, Deno.com, examples.deno.land, the website for the linting tool. I'm probably forgetting half of them, but there's a bunch of sites which are running them. Fresh is serving millions of requests every day successfully. It's very much ready to use for actual production traffic. That does not mean we're done developing it, though. There's still features we're adding and improvements we're making, and I'm sure there will still be bugs. But yeah, it's stable enough that we trust to run Deno on it completely.
Yeah.
What about breaking changes? If I port all my apps to it right now,
which
how
Ross
much
is actually doing right now as we talk. You can see him typing. He's actually porting immediately.
Yeah, if I do that, what would happen?
If you port all of your sites, then I will make sure to publish a breaking change tomorrow. If anyone else does it, I won't. No, it's 1.0. We went 1.0. I'm not planning to do a 2.0 tomorrow. Nor am I planning to do a 2.0 over the next 3 months, or 6 months, or 9 months probably even. Like Deno has been out for 2 years now. It's still in the 1.0 release branch, or sorry, 1.x release branch, like we're 1.24 right now. And yeah, that's the reason we managed to do that is because we really thought long and hard about these the API stability before we released 1.0, and we did the same with Fresh. So we're hoping that the API is going to be strong enough to have real people using it and not break. And if there are things that will change, they'll change in a backwards compatible way, so to not break your applications.
What kind of stuff is missing? When I think of batteries included, I think of things like testing harnesses, deployment stories, form builders. I think of things like CSRF protection and like various things that generally are the kind of smaller batteries that get added later when things more mature. But at 1.0, like what are some major stuff that's missing if I do pick it up for my blog or my e-commerce site or to rewrite BitMidi for Feross? What my stuff might have to go out and find or build my own?
Yeah, so the things that are really included right now is routing, templating, and data handling. What is not included right now is anything related to data persistence. So that's something that we're going to be working on. The story around styling, around CSS, it works, but it's not great yet. There's definitely going to be improvements there. And the story around being able to talk between islands, so client-side rendered code and the server dynamically, to do like data fetching from the server dynamically, that's also going to be improved in the future very much. So those are like the three big things that are coming up pretty quickly here. And then like our deployment story is already pretty fantastic. Like you can deploy to Deno deploy with no configuration, and like deploys are instant because there's no build step. So it's literally you push something to a Git branch and it gives you the green checkbox immediately with a link to click on. Yeah, but we're still working on.
What if I have Stockholm syndrome for build steps? Like, what if I really, really want one?
Then actually, that's also totally possible. You can use GitHub Actions, but I would urge you to see a doctor if you like build steps.
Well, we've been running them for so many years now. You're kind of like, you feel naked without a build step. You're like, wait a second. I'm just going to ship this code as it is to production.
Yeah, it's actually been like really fantastic not having a build step, because like originally this started out as we just wanted to have so fast deploys that anything to do with the build step would just be too slow for the deploys, for Deno deploy this is. So we just originally didn't have any support for doing any sort of build step, and this sort of really had to we had to get very creative in how to do certain things to be able to like support these modern use cases that people have without a build step. And I think it's been pretty successful so far. Like we have a way to do build steps now using GitHub Actions if you want to. But yeah, it's like really nice to not have a build step. It's like insanely fast. It's yeah, very nice. None of our internal sites use build steps because I don't know. I like pushing code and then immediately having like my production or preview deployment, I guess.
Yeah. I'm being 100% facetious. I do not want a build step, and I would love to get rid of build steps. I'm from the days where you used to just say script source equals, and then you just put your like app.js locally referenced and wrote your code in there, and it was a beautiful thing. And then our apps got bigger and bigger, and it became cumbersome and unwieldy. But when it works, it's a beautiful thing. So I'm very excited to have this new trend back towards no build step. And because it's Deno, your TypeScript just works.
Yeah.
And then because it's Deno, your JavaScript just works.
Yes, also.
So I noticed it does generate .ts files. Can I turn that off?
You can't actually in the fresh init thing, but
I'm out.
You can manually rename all your files to JavaScript if you want to.
Actually, that might be kind of satisfying. Just go in there like, just JavaScript, please.
Script out, rip out all the types. But yeah, I don't know. Types are nice. TypeScripts,
That's what
I
everyone
feel like
keeps telling me.
Yeah.
I was like against TypeScript for a long time, but now I'm actually for it for at least for apps. Like working with other people with types is actually pretty nice.
Building your blog?
Building your blog with types, yeah, I don't know, maybe that's not necessary.
But like, okay, so what's the reason you think that's not necessary? Because it's too difficult to set up, or because it's like too much overhead?
Because
to think
it's not solving a problem that I have generally
about? Oh,
on a
okay.
blog.
Well, like for me, TypeScript, like I don't even care about the type checking so much as I do about the editor completions. Like for me, the editor completions are the really great thing with TypeScript. That like I can just type up some code and get really nice completions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just me though. I don't know.
Fair enough. No, I think it's not just you. I think a lot of people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's cool. It doesn't like sell it for me, but I mostly am a TypeScript hater by occupation because Nick Nisi is the TypeScript fanboy on the show, and so therefore I must be his antithesis, and so I can't actually like it by fiat.
Okay.
So you're not going to convince me because it'd be going against my entire purpose of being here.
Okay. So once we're on break again, you will switch to loving TypeScript.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Feross was on my team for a very long time, but he's recently switched. In fact, I think everybody has. I think I'm the only one left. Actually, Chris Hiller likes to use the JS doc style typing, but he doesn't like actual TypeScript. So I still have him as a holdout. But I really don't have much of a basis. I mostly just joke around about it.
My objection is usually around like just the amount of overhead it takes to get going, which I think Deno solves. Like
exactly. That's why I had to say this, because this does solve it. Like getting started was, and getting it all rigged up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's stuff that's missing. We talked about who should use it, who should not use it. What about the community? So it's like very much a Deno company kind of building this thing, but is it like hands off, Deno's building this thing, or is it like, hey, come contribute, we want to like form a community around it? Is there a governance model, etc.?
Yeah. So it's open source. Anyone can contribute. Just to give you a frame of reference of what the interactivity here is from the community, like every day I wake up today, I have like, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 open PRs and like 30 new issues on the repo to deal with. And then I spend the first 5 hours of my day merging community PRs and replying to issues and GitHub discussions and whatever. So like there's a lot of community interest here, and people are actively contributing. And actually, one of the people that is working on Fresh does not work with the Deno team at all. He just liked the project and started contributing to it. And yeah, if you have awesome ideas for things to improve, just post an issue on the issue tracker, or we chat very actively on our Discord, discord.gg/Deno. There's a Fresh channel there, where people come up with ideas, and then like we'll discuss them and figure out how to implement them together.
Love it. Well, you've piqued my interest. You've given us a little bit of the lay of the land. I definitely want to give this a shot. I've given Deno a little bit of a try, and I've appreciated it for what it is. I haven't had a good excuse to use it in any sort of non-toy capacity, so I'm just kind of waiting for that opportunity. And usually that's a web app, and so I think I even said on the show maybe 6 or 8 months ago, like what Deno needs is a web framework, and turns out y'all were working on it, so that makes me feel like a smart human. But maybe you guys are the
killer
smart
app
humans.
problem.
Yeah, maybe I just stay in the obvious, and you guys are the smart ones. Feross, any other questions for Luca or thoughts on Fresh before we call it a show?
No, I think this is awesome. I love that it uses Preact. I love that it seems really well thought out, and it's minimalist, and there's no build step. This is cool. Yeah, nice work.
Thank you.
Luca, any final words? Anything else we want to say to the JS Party community before we let you go?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if you want to try out Fresh, go to like fresh.deno.dev and give it a spin. And if you have any thoughts, just let us know. Good or bad.
Good or bad. I'll let you get back to your 21 open pull requests and your 52 open issues. You definitely have people interested, which is a blessing and can be a curse from time to time, but at least this is your job, so that's a spectacular thing. We will have the links to all the things Fresh, Deno. We'll have Jason Miller's Islands architecture post in your show notes. So there's a great place to follow up with the things discussed on today's episode. On behalf of Feross, I'm Jerod. Luca, thanks for being here. This has been JS Party, and we'll talk to y'all next time. I don't have my outro song. I do have this. No, I don't. I think the soundboard breaks after a certain amount of time. Maybe it's just literally not working. Oh, there it worked. I was trying to play cheering. The cheering sound doesn't work. All right.
Aw.
We will put in good sounds in post-production.
I'm saying,
So I was trying to
Tony,
get
this
I was trying to
is
have
an
it
FBA
clap
problem.
for us on the way out. It's gonna be nice, but it wouldn't do it. It'll play other. Oh, no. All right. Yeah, it's super broken. Okay, cool. Good show, guys. You can save your local recording there. You can hit stop and save. We don't need you to upload it unless we have issues with the Riverside version. So I'll hang up on the YouTube folks. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all next week. Hey, Front End Feud next week. Stay tuned for that. Bye, y'all.